Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into two really charged proposals that are shaking things up in UK policy. One could actually see civil servants facing prison time for decisions they make on the job, and the other involves a call to strip a man of his British citizenship.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the big idea that connects both of these stories, accountability. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the first proposal on the asylum process, and after that, the big debate around citizenship. We'll also hear the official responses, and then we'll wrap it all up with the key things you need to know.
So let's start with that central thread, the thing that really ties both of these proposals together. It all comes down to a demand for way more accountability, not just from government systems, but from the actual people working inside them and for those who hold British citizenship. You know, the first policy we're looking at really boils down to this one pretty provocative question. This gets right to the heart of how government works, right? It challenges the legal protections civil servants have had for a long, long time and suggests a whole new level of personal risk for the choices they make. Okay, let's get into the specifics of that first proposal from Reform UK. It basically puts the entire asylum process under a microscope, asking some tough questions about how these huge decisions are actually being made and, by who. So to build their case, Reform UK points to this really striking number, a 99% approval rate for asylum seekers from Afghanistan just last year. They use this, along with other high approval rates, to argue that the system is under so much pressure that it's just waving claims through instead of properly checking them. And that concern seems to be backed up by a whistleblower, someone from inside the system. They claim that caseworkers are just under immense pressure to clear this massive backlog of claims. So much so that the whole thing has been reduced to what they call a tick box exercise. Basically, speed over security. And to really hammer home the potential public safety risks, Reform UK highlights this data. According to their figures, Afghan nationals in the UK are 20 times more likely to be convicted of a sex offense compared to British citizens. They're basically framing this as a direct result of what they see as a totally broken asylum system. So, how do they propose to fix this? Well, their solution is pretty radical. They want to create a brand new criminal offense called dishonestly determining an asylum claim. It would specifically target civil servants who are found to have knowingly approved asylum for someone with a known history of serious crimes. And the penalties they're proposing are, well, they're severe. It's a three-step process. First, if you're found guilty, you're immediately fired, sacked. Step 2, you lose your pension and all your other benefits. And finally, you could face criminal prosecution and even end up in prison for up to 2 years. And this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of the policy. The whole point is to make it impossible for a civil servant to turn around and say, hey, I was just following orders. This puts all the legal responsibility squarely on the individual who signs off on that final decision. All right, let's switch gears. We're moving from that big systemic proposal to our second case. And this one is way more personal. It focuses on just one individual and a really fierce debate over whether he should even be allowed to remain a British citizen. The person at the center of all this is Alaa Abd El-Fattah. He holds dual British-Egyptian citizenship, and his return to the UK after being imprisoned in Egypt has just ignited this huge public firestorm. So what's fueling the controversy? It's a series of his old social media posts that have been brought back into the spotlight, and the list is, well, it's deeply inflammatory. We're talking about everything from praising terrorists and calling for violence against the police to expressing some incredibly hateful racist ideology. So, in response to all of this, Reform UK's position is crystal clear. They are calling for his British citizenship to be revoked and for him to be put in prison. They argue his past statements make him a direct threat to the country. Of course, this is not a one-sided debate by any means. To get a fuller picture, we need to look at the official reactions. We've got statements from both the UK government and a major human rights group, and wow, they really show just how divided opinions are on this. The government's official line focuses on his legal status. They confirm, yep, he's a British citizen, and, get this, securing his release from prison in Egypt has actually been a diplomatic priority for a long time across multiple governments. Now, in stark contrast, you have Amnesty International, who celebrated his release. They called his pardon the end of a grave injustice and praised the relentless work of his family and activists around the world. So two completely different takes. Okay, so we've looked at these two very different but sort of related controversies. What are the big takeaways? What do we really need to understand here? Well, what we've seen are two really different ways of dealing with what are perceived as threats. On one hand, you've got a systemic approach. It targets the process and the people inside it with the threat of criminal charges. On the other hand, it's deeply personal, targeting one individual with the ultimate penalty of having their citizenship completely stripped away. And when you boil it all down, both of these cases force a really difficult conversation. They push us to confront this deep, deep tension between our core values as a society, and they leave us with this final, crucial question. Where exactly do we draw the line between the rights of an individual citizen and the safety of the entire nation?